Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Virtual Melt University. We are rolling through the fall, virtual college, live college, college football, in a crazy COVID world. We appreciate the response and the feedback from our amazing podcast. We've had some great guests. We're getting great feedback, great suggestions. And today's guest is one of my favorite people. You can't help but light up when you see her. We never got to get to see each other as much as we wanted to, but Erica Tuggle, brand director for the Coca-Cola Company since May of 2018. But we have gotten to become very, very good friends along the way, and just a really, really great person. Attended the New York University Stern School of Business and an MBA from the Harvard Business School. We're going to talk about that in a little while. Started a career in marketing at American Express, then General Mills, then Sprite. We've talked to a lot of leaders from Sprite. Jeff Cottrell was on earlier. Darryl Cobbin was on earlier. And then continued to move up the ladder with honesty at the Coca-Cola Company. And my experience of working with her was overseeing the most vaunted, valuable trademark in the world as a brand manager and a brand director. And we'll talk about kind of what all of that means. But Erica, we welcome you to the thousands of students who are now tuning in to Virtual Melt University.
Thank you so much, Vince, and that was very kind. So I appreciate the very kind introduction, but excited to spend some time with you and the students virtually.
Well, obviously, meant every word is said. It's just always fun in business to find people that you align with and you like, and you share personal values and common goals. And we've had a lot of great times, a lot of great fun together, Super Bowls, food and wine festivals, and Final Fours, and all those kind of things. And I miss those days, and I'm hoping that we'll get back to them sooner or later as we continue to dive headfirst into the holidays. But kind of before we always dive into, talking about your career and all these types of things, we always want to know where the original sort of passion started. And we're always amazed to find that, like, sometimes people go to college set on one focus or direction of passion, and they get into it and they go, well, maybe I'm not so passionate here, and I focus my passion here. Like we've heard from, say, Shannon Watkins, and she went to be a doctor, and then she winds up, being this amazing in the brand business. So on your path, because obviously NYU and Harvard are, as good as it gets, where was all of this rooted in? Where was this passion, and desire to be in business, or was it there? Where was it rooted?
It was. So, Vince, I'm one of those people who did go to college pretty clear on what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to be in marketing. It was more a question of which industry, because as you know, marketing looks very different across many different industries, right, and there are a lot of ways in. And so I had, fortunately, when I was was I a junior in college, in high school, I was a part of a program for high school students that exposed you to business. And so I was a part of a program called LEAD, and it took me to University of Chicago for a few weeks over the summer and just exposed me to many different courses beyond finance and marketing and organizational behavior. And I very quickly learned that I just really enjoyed the business space. It was something that I found really fulfilling for me as I started to understand it more. Marketing in particular, I realized would allow me to be still creative, which I've always had a lot of creative bones in my body.
Right.
But it allowed me to be creative, but also very strategic and very aware of the total business, which I've also always enjoyed. So I kind of, after that program, I went to NYU, as you mentioned, Stern undergrad business school. and I went right into marketing. And it was kind of from there, my internships and then my career thereafter just all kind of fell into that space.
So, I mean, obviously, maybe other than Wharton, but I'd consider Harvard and then Wharton 1 and 2. The process of gaining admission into the Harvard Business School, and then the process of going through the Harvard Business School. How did that impact you, and how did that change you or shift you? And then I'm getting a lot of questions now, particularly in this virtual environment that so many students are in. They're questioning the value, or whether or not they should pursue a master's degree as well. So, sort of answer that in 2 or 3 parts, like the admission process to Harvard, and then how that experience at Harvard Business School shifted you, and from your perspective, what is the value of an MBA in these turbulent times?
Great questions. Starting with the first one, that experience of applying, honestly, for me, it was a bit more of a confidence builder, even through the process, even before I got in, because I wasn't one who always had my eyes set on Harvard Business School. It was more while working at American Express, I saw people who had applied and who had done things similar to me, and who were going prior to me to HBS. And I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I should give it a try. And in developing the application and speaking with some of my mentors and leaders at American Express, I realized kind of what I had to offer. And so it was an awesome experience. And then, of course, getting in, really, for me, again, it was all around just a really nice confidence builder for something that I honestly didn't imagine I would ever do. And so I absolutely went in just kind of starry-eyed and excited and in a little bit of disbelief. But then when I was there, what I'll say is that experience is, for me, especially going to Harvard Business School, where the community and the quality of education are just so top notch. I mean, the community itself, you go to school with people who have already done phenomenal things and worked in amazing companies and even done things on their own, whether they be entrepreneurial endeavors or other things that really are not only inspiring, but create a lot of the educational experience for you. So you're able to learn from your classmates just as much as you are from your professors. And then the professors have these phenomenal business resumes and have really seen it all. They've lived every case and every kind of experience that we're learning through. And it gave me just such a well-rounded understanding of the business world. I felt like a really kind of an experience based in reality. And really, for me, not only built my mind, but also, and this is probably what you hear about, probably one of the more valuable things about the MBA experience, but it also built my network.
Right.
And so the people that you walk away having spent that quality time with and having picked their brains and them delving into your brain and those relationships that you create over that. And then, of course, over some of the social things that you get to do together, the traveling, et cetera, all of that, it's so rich. And that, for me, is honestly the real value from an MBA. You walk away with just these incredible relationships and people whom, like even today, I'm, on a WhatsApp chat with my section of 90 plus individuals from HBS, and we're all helping each other out and cheering each other on. And it's a really awesome bond that you can't quite, I don't think, find in other places.
Yeah, I've, some of my longest mentors and clients were, at a Harvard MBA, and I've always been fascinated to hear about, and they tell me about this. The Harvard MBA network is one of the most unbelievable networks in the world. But you touch on a couple of things that I really want to talk about. Is that no matter the value of the college experience, even the undergrad experience, is the relationship building, because it is what you know and who you know. And we talk a lot to our students, Erica, about the value of relationships and the value of, and it's in my book as well, like you've got to nurture, relationship. And people say, well, how do you work with Coke for 20 years? It's like, I never take that relationship for granted. I water it, I flower it, I fertilize it, I prune it, I trim it, I get it sunlight. And I think that what you're saying about Harvard MBA, but no matter if you're at Harvard or Georgia or Auburn, or no matter where you are, you're forming and building those professional and personal bonds for the rest of your life. So talk about sort of your philosophy of nurturing those relationships. And you and I have always been good at nurturing our relationship. We may go 3, 4, 5, 6 months, but then, hey, what's up? You okay? And it really was less about business than it was just, because the business will take care of itself. But if you're not nurturing that relationship, I'd say the first 2 letters of RE are relationship, and the 2 letters of reciprocal are RE, first 2 letters. So talk about sort of your philosophy of nurturing and maintaining these relationships, and how valuable that comes in at various life stages.
Yeah, I love that you talk about reciprocal, because I think that is key in terms of, as you think about a relationship, just like any relationship, a friendship or a marriage or whatever it might be. There, you want to make sure that you're giving of yourself to the other individual, and obviously that they're doing the same in return. And as I think about relationships, especially when it comes to business, at the core of mine is just recognizing that everybody is human. To
Right.
your point as well, it's interesting. You're right. The business almost it comes with the relationship, as long as you're recognizing and treating someone as a human. And I think sometimes we forget,
Right.
when we're talking to, whether it be a colleague or an agency partner, and sometimes it's not so much that we forget, but that we're a bit shy in acting as humans versus just business people or marketing directors or whatever it might be. And so that really, for me, is at the core, understanding that people have families and they have passions and they have things that make them who they are beyond the business in which you're engaged. And so that's been really at the core for me, and it helps me to, one, not only obviously advance the business relationship, but even have a little bit more of a personal edge to it, where you can really connect in a deeper way and stay connected. I remember, even you and I reaching out and, asking how your son's doing, and
Right.
those sort of things matter to people and matter to me. And I think that just helps, to your point, let the business come along with the relationship, but really let the relationship blossom.
Right. And you've worked with, being in, charge of the Coke trademark, the Coke brand. You've worked with the biggest stars and biggest names in the world. And through my work, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of them as well. But at the end of the day, you really realize that these are just people too, that they may have certain gifts in areas. They may have been successful or made a lot of money or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're still people, and kind of having that sort of that commoner's touch, does go a long way. And the other thing is that, and we're all in the same boat right now with the pandemic, across the globe, and a lot of empathy required, and a lot of patience, and a lot of understanding, and communicating through Zoom and those types of things. So I think it's, I tell my students, and I wish I had learned this a lot earlier, is that, sometimes somebody may not give you the answer you want. They may tell you no, but you really can't take it personal, because from an empathy perspective, you don't know what that person is going through or what influenced that decision, or they hired somebody a little bit bigger, but you can't in that relationship, because you don't know when it's all going to come back around. And so I think, like you said, like, take that college opportunity to really develop those relationships within. I'm sure you had tremendous relationships with your professors, obviously professors at Harvard, and the networking and all that type of stuff. But so that it's fascinating to learn that you sort of had that passion. Were your parents in business? I mean, did that shape and form you a little bit as well?
Yeah, that is also a great question. A little bit. So my mother was never in business. She initially she has primarily been a social worker her whole life. But she and my father decided to own a nursery school when I was in, what is it, probably middle school going into high school. And so that, in a bit, watching them be business owners, shaped me a bit. But my dad was also always in business. And so he worked with several large companies in human resources. And so for me, you think about those moments when you got to go into work with your parents, right? And I
Right.
have many memories of going into his office and meeting the people that he worked with and just kind of being in awe of all of that. So I'm sure that shaped me a bit, as you think about just having that exposure. And I always believe that, exposure is the first step to just so many opportunities for people. And so, yes, I'm sure that shaped me quite a bit.
Well, we've had a lot of a lot of your esteemed colleagues and my friends on our podcast, and the term brand director, brand manager. There's been some very enlightening moments in our podcast because it has everything and very little to do with being quote unquote a brand director. I mean, you're basically a general manager of a
Mm-hmm.
massive business with a massive P&L, and our students will go, well, God, I thought just being a brand, you were going to be like a marketer and this and that. And I'm like, well, you are, but you're also, I mean, when you're in charge of the Coke Red trademark, I mean, you're running a multi-billion-dollar business. Kind of unpack your roles and responsibility, being the overseer of one of the most iconic brand in the world, because there's so many different things that you learned in school and you learned along the way that you applied to this. Correct?
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that because it is one of the things that I was mentioning about the LEAD program I did, and even HBS, especially as an educational foundation, where you're exposed to all parts of the business because as a marketer, you need to know all parts of the business, which is
Right.
something that I think, to your point, a lot of people are sometimes confused by or don't fully understand because it seems like perhaps you're only doing creative and creating commercials and billboards and that sort of thing. But as a part of the work that we do to run the Coca-Cola trademark and being a brand director, I'm not only responsible for exactly those things, so communications and how we understand our consumers and obviously communicate with them in a compelling and hopefully motivating way, but we're also responsible for thinking through the forecast on the business and what we think we're going to essentially sell so that we can inform and help the supply chain to be able to meet then that forecast, and so that we can help and inform the P&L to be able to understand how much money we're going to bring in a quarter, et cetera. You're also engaged with the customers. So we actually spend quite a bit of time making sure that the customers that we work with, whether it be a Walmart or a Target or other names that are, where you'll find a Coca-Cola, that they have plans in place that are developed in partnership with us that are going to make sure that the total, picture that we have for what a successful year on the business would be is actually met. And similarly, we work very much with our distribution partners, so our bottlers, to also make sure that we understand the elements of their business and what they need in order to be successful and profitable when it comes to our work as well. And so it really is, it's understanding really all facets of the business. And I love to think about it as people typically say, it's marketing being the spoke in the wheel, and you're really working across every function to make sure that the business is running well and that you're not only growing your brand equity, but you're also growing your brand value, which is, the revenue and the profitability behind your brand.
I've been involved with with the Coca-Cola Company since I was stacking 8-ounce contour bottles for my dad owned a grocery store. But we've been working with Coke for 20 years, and even before that, I was a customer. But to me, it's still the most fascinating system in the world, and we could probably spend an additional hour um, um, unpacking every facet and element that you just talked about. I mean, to me, it's just the most, and our students have gotten really enlightened about the business processes of Coke, because everybody goes, "Oh, I'd love to work for Coca-Cola," and I'm like, "Well, A, that's a mouthful, and B, it's so large, 200, 20 plus countries it's distributed in. Mothership doesn't own its distribution, so you're dealing with these major families and major businesses, and it never gets old to unpack it, and then having to forecast all of these types of things in the middle of a pandemic and access to supplies. I was talking to one of the bottlers the other day, and he's like, my biggest problem right now is access to aluminum and the price of aluminum, just things that you never would really think about it. But I just made myself a note. I wanted to go back to your experience in the undergrad experience at Harvard, and then your rise and climb above the way. Also the importance of mentors. How have I know they've been very important to me. Guardian Angels, I try to mentor as many kids as I can, but talk about the importance of mentors to you in your life, and talk about how you choose those mentors and the value that they have brought to your success.
That's also a really great question. I am a huge believer in mentorship, and similar to you, try to also give back what I have received by mentoring others, because it is just so critical. Mm-hmm. I found that mentorship for me has been not only a really great way to just in general learn and be exposed to different ways of thinking and different business, but also to have someone who just has perspective that I have not yet gained, but that I can borrow from and use as I'm making decisions about my career or, taking on new opportunities. And so mentors for me have always actually throughout my career, ever since the very beginning, and even in internships have been right. a really important pillar that's contributed to the success that I've been able to have. And I would say there are a few things that I look for. One is that perspective again. So someone who has that experience that either I want or that looks like, a future that I would want to have for myself. I also look for people whom I am comfortable with, because I do think that's important. But I'll also share the flip side of that. I think it's important because you are going to have moments in your career where you're going to need to be vulnerable and make some very difficult decisions, and having someone whom you can be comfortable with to have really honest conversation is really important. And so I've looked to, find people whom I can connect with and also feel comfortable with in order to build those relationships. But I'll also say I've found it valuable to sprinkle in a few people who are different from me in some way or another. So whether, they have a different background or have approached their career differently. I have a couple of people that I would consider mentors who are just different personalities from me and have made different choices. But again, it's that perspective that I found really valuable, because what I've noticed is that I can be, you kind of go on your career path and you can be quite narrow in the possibilities. But if you broaden your perspective, which I think mentors are awesome at, and they're also awesome at being honest with you and really getting to know you, then you can really kind of unleash that career in a different way.
Well, I always tell people that seek me out about mentors, I'm like, I'm not the guy that you should pick if you want it sugar coated. I'm going to tell you exactly the unvarnished way of things. And I've always wanted that with my mentors. I'm like, don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what I need to hear. Mm-hmm. And to your point, you can have a diverse cast of mentors in your life. They don't necessarily have to be, 30 years older than you. And you can find mentors in uncommon places, and there's always these nugget of wisdoms. But to your point, seek out mentors who are going to, it's a life coach. I mean, they're going to, like I said, they maybe it's your parents, but never ever tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. But this is great. So we, Erica, we're talking to just literally tons of kids, and they're going through. There's a lot of things that they're going through that I don't think any of us, when I saw you at the first of the year, I was like, hey, I can't wait. Final Four is always fun for us. It was going to be in Atlanta. It's always a fun, victory lap, and I don't think 7, 8, 9 months later we would be envision we'd be having this conversation. But our students right now are living in a Obviously, if they're in school, a lot of their classes are in a virtual and online environment. There is my theory on the job market, particularly marketing services. It's going to be very, very hard because you're going to have fewer people, with more people looking for fewer jobs and willing to take lesser salaries. So I think it's going to depress a lot of the entry level job market as well. We don't know if we'll have offices to go to in the foreseeable future. You've got to do you've got to do, you've got to, bring the heat in a virtual and Zoom environment. So, one thing that we've tried to do with our podcasts and books and newsletters and all that is really just try to, what gets high level executives' attention, like Erica Tuggle. And I still tell our students, I'm like, I don't care what format or medium it's in. There's still some basics that you have got to do. Mm-hmm. And if somebody is looking to seek you out through LinkedIn, or get a resume in front of you, or want some advice or dialogue or mentorship, what are the things that get your attention? And as I said, there's still a lot of the basics, 101 common sense. But from your perspective, where do you sit? What are things that stand out to you?
A few things, and I sympathize with this group of young people, not because I've necessarily experienced some of the challenges, but I think it is going to be a more difficult one. And so there are a few things I think to keep in mind. One is clarity and even I'll say brevity, but it's really clarity, and it's clarity in what you want and why you want it, which requires, I think, a really good kind of internal exercise of understanding, what you're interested in and what experiences you've had personally and even within, maybe jobs along the way, that really make you truly interested in the company and also in the role or the work that you would be doing. And that's important because, especially I think in a depressed market, because you'll have a lot of people who are kind of, what do you call it, just kind of spraying their out there and trying to find anything. But what you really want when you're hiring is someone who genuinely understands the business, but also just has a passion for being a part of it, because that will take any employee very far in terms of being successful in the company. So I would say having that clarity of who you are, why you want a certain position and want to be in a certain company is really important. And it's often, one of the first or even last questions in an interview, but it's always there. In addition to that, I would say what makes people stand out and I always look for is having a pretty clear point of view as well. And so as you're sharing your experiences in an interview, or as you're even reaching out to have someone consider you for a role, the opportunity that you can take is really putting out a perspective, because that is what essentially, especially in marketing and in business professions, what you're being paid for is to have an informed point of view, but to have a point of view that you're willing to share and you're willing to defend. And it says a lot about not only your ability to take information and come to conclusions, but also about your own confidence and your own strength that will, again, make you a really strong employee. So that's something else. So having a strong point of view and being able to share that in whatever form you may have the opportunity, I think is really great. And then being curious. I mean, the competitive landscape is always, it's just increasingly challenging, regardless of where you are in terms of industry. I feel like the world is constantly changing and competitors are constantly either emerging or evolving. And so being curious and showing that you're truly, again, interested in the space, but also just have that kind of energy and interest to learn more and have ways of learning and always learning, I think also shows a talent that is not just going to come and be stagnant, but will come into an organization and actually continue to grow and develop and continue to get better.
Mm-hmm. Well, you hit on a lot of things, and obviously, I love people who are curious. I love people who are well informed. I love people that reach out to me that have done their homework. They're showing effort, attitude, initiative. But also, and you hit on something that I really like is that whether I agree with you or not, I like somebody to have a point of view. I like them to be authentic. I don't, I love that, and I love that. I love to see those things, and I think they've always been very important. But the world we live in now, I tell our students, I'm like, this is the job process is not an application; it's a process. It's an audition. Every interaction that you have with Erica is forming an impression. Everything that she sees about you on social media is forming these impressions, and now more so than ever. But I love the clarity. I love the brevity. I love the authenticity. I love being curious. Those are a lot of things that get my attention as well. And so, as we wrap up this great conversation, because like I said, we could unpack so many things, but share. I always love to know what our leaders are reading or listening to or watching. What are and beyond the industry trades and things what are your go-tos, books, authors, and things that shape and inform and influence you that we should share with our listeners today?
Oh gosh, this is also an awesome question. I there are a few things that I always look at, and so one is going to seem like a plug because I went to HBS, but I do really enjoy the Harvard Business Review, and I often get kind of fed information from that from my work and experience with the school, Harvard Business School, but that is one that I absolutely love. I also right now just picked up again, How Will You Measure Your Life, which is from Mr. Clay Christensen, the late Clay Christensen, who was a professor at HBS as well. But it was something that really struck a chord with me, when I was there 10 years ago. And I wanted to pick up again, because I think as you kind of, and all of us, go through the year that we've had, there are things that you just kind of naturally start to rethink and reconsider, and how you want to spend your time and what you want to be doing, whether it's personally or professionally. And so this book is one that I think really helps you to think through that. And so that's a good one that I've just recently picked up. I will also say I'm also, this is much more personal, it's not business related, but also reading, what is this book I have on my daughter, which is The Strong-Willed Child. So that one will hopefully help me. That one will hopefully help me through these the coming 3-year-old years. But
that would be called Payback, by the way.
That's very true. I actually think that's right, spot on. So that's more on a personal note. And then I'll be honest. Reading, whether it's through Smart Brief or some of the Fortune magazine articles that come through, I try to just stay broadly aware from an industry perspective of what's going on, whether it be mergers and acquisitions or even new campaigns, having, Ad Age and all of those great publications, just to make sure that you stay abreast of what's happening in the marketing world is how I've also approached it.
Now you're spot on about all of that. It's like, you got to be well informed. You got to be curious. You got to be, and again, like, if you're interviewing for a job anywhere, you always got to know that target, the subject matter, all about interview the interviewer and those types of things, particularly with, you at your level, as well as, Coca-Cola being this giant global organization. But I think those are some great tips. But this has been so enjoyable today. Erica Tuggle, brand director. She's going to take a little bit of hiatus. She'll be back for the Coca-Cola Company since May of 2018. Been a great, great career, great education, great friend. As you can tell, you can feel that warmth and that attitude, and it's coming through even this conversation. One of my favorite people, and stay in touch with her, follow her. Just a great inspiration and great role model for a lot of people. But Erica, we hope you have a wonderful holiday. We hope you continue to stay safe with your family through all this craziness we're all going through. And we really, really appreciate you sharing your time and words of wisdom with our students of virtual Melt University.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Vince. And thanks again for having me. This is such an awesome platform to be able to help students just learn more about what their future careers could be. So I'm so appreciative of you for inviting me to be on. So thank you.
Absolutely. What an honor. Erica, thank you. And students, we'll be back soon with more Virtual Melt U podcast.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.